Welcome to the interpretation of your personality test results. After watching this video, we hope you will gain a better understanding of yourself in terms of your personality traits. If you have questions along the way, just list them down and send it to us after watching this interpretation video. In job seeking, employers look into various factors in hiring employees: transcript of records, acquired knowledge and skills, experiences related to the job, and more importantly, personality and work attitude. That is why it is important to know your personality, to identify what career it would best fit, and to use it as a strength in your future career. What are personality traits? Personality traits describe the frequency or intensity of a person's feelings, thoughts, or behaviors in comparison to other people. Possession of a trait is therefore a matter of degree. We might describe two individuals as extroverts, but still see one is more extroverted than the other. Throughout the interpretation video, we will use expressions such as extrovert or high in extroversion to describe someone who is likely to be seen by others as relatively extroverted. Keep in mind that there is no value judgment implied. Low, average, and high scores on a personality test are neither absolutely good nor bad. A particular level on any trait will probably be neutral or irrelevant for a great many activities, be helpful for accomplishing some things, and detrimental for accomplishing other things. As with any personality test, scores and descriptions can only approximate an individual's actual personality. High and low score descriptions are usually accurate, but average scores close to the low or high boundaries might misclassify you as only average. Personality traits are relatively stable, but can change over time due to experiences that may change your traits. For example, traumatic experiences can alter some of your personality traits. And lastly, your behavior is a result of several underlying factors. Thus, personality traits are not the only influence of who you are. Biological factors, such as hormonal imbalance, can affect how we behave. IPIP-NEO is a personality test that utilizes the 5-factor model of personality, and it is the most widely used method to assess personality. Based on extensive research, there are 5 core personality traits. The ocean. Here is a summary of the core personality traits and their facets or sub-factors. If your score is low or high, your trait is on the extreme end of the scale. Specific interpretations are given for each distinct trait. The greater the number of your distinct traits, the more unique your personality expression is. If your trait is on the average scale, your trait is neither high nor low. Your trait is similar with most people. One interpretation is that how you behave depends on the situation. Another way to look at it is that you may be uncertain of how you behave or will behave. Another theory is that there may be personality traits that apply only to some people but not others. The greater the number of your typical traits, the greater balance and flexibility your approach to life is.
The first core personality trait is extraversion. Extraversion is defined as marked by pronounced engagement with the external world. It is one's tendency towards sociability, assertiveness, and emotional expressiveness. If you scored high in extraversion, you are more likely to be enthusiastic, be action-oriented, say yes to opportunities, assert and draw attention to yourself, be sociable, outgoing, and be around people much of the time, and be energetic and lively. If you scored low in extroversion, you tend to be introverted, be independent and reserved. You can be mistaken as unfriendly or arrogant, which may not be always the case. Be quiet, low-key, deliberate, and disengaged from the social world. You tend to enjoy solitude and solitary activities. Limit your socializing to a few close friends. Lack the exuberance, energy, and activity levels of extroverts. Need less stimulation than an extrovert. you prefer to be alone, which should not be interpreted as shyness or depression. If you scored average in extraversion, you are moderate in activity and enthusiasm, and you enjoy the company of others but you also value privacy. Depending on the situation, you may be introverted or extroverted. You can be outgoing when situation calls for it, and introverted on other settings. For example, you are energetic around people you are familiar with but quite shy to those who you don't know. The same principle applies for the facets of extroversion. The facets of extroversion are friendliness, gregariousness, assertiveness, activity level, excitement seeking, and cheerfulness. If you scored high in friendliness, you tend to genuinely like other people, openly demonstrate positive feelings toward others, make friends quickly, and easily form close, intimate relationships. If you scored low in friendliness, you are not necessarily cold and hostile, but you tend to prefer not reaching out to others. You are perceived as distant and reserved by others. If you scored high in gregariousness, you tend to find the company of others pleasantly stimulating and rewarding, and enjoy the excitement of crowds. If you scored low in gregariousness, you tend to feel overwhelmed by large crowds, thus you actively avoid crowds, and you have a greater need for privacy and time for yourself. If you scored high in assertiveness, you tend to be a leader in groups, speak out, take charge, and direct the activities of others. If you scored low in assertiveness, you prefer not talking much and letting others control the activities of groups. If you scored high in activity level, you are more likely to lead fast-paced and busy life, move about quickly, energetically, and vigorously, and be involved in many activities. If you scored low in activity level, you tend to follow a slower and more leisurely and relaxed pace. If you scored high in excitement seeking, you tend to be easily bored without high levels of stimulation, and you take risks and seek thrills. If you scored low in excitement seeking, you are more likely to be overwhelmed by noise and commotion, and be averse to thrill seeking. If your score is high in cheerfulness, you typically experience a range of positive feelings including happiness, enthusiasm, optimism, and joy. If your score is low in cheerfulness, you are less likely to be prone to such energetic and high spirits.
Agreeableness reflects individual differences with regard to cooperation and social harmony, how a person generally interacts and gets along with others. It is advantageous for attaining and maintaining popularity. Agreeable people are better liked than disagreeable people. It is not useful in situations that require tough or absolute objective decisions. If you score high in agreeableness, you are more likely to have a strong interest in others' needs and well-being, that you are willing to compromise your interests with others. Be pleasant, sympathetic, and cooperative. You value getting along with others. Be considerate, friendly, generous, and helpful. Have an optimistic view of human nature, that you believe people are basically honest, decent, and trustworthy. If your score is low in agreeableness, you are more likely to have less concern with others' needs and well-being, and therefore, you are unlikely to extend yourself for other people. You place self-interest above getting along with others. You may be seen as tough, critical, and uncompromising. You are a skeptic about others' motives, causing them to be suspicious, unfriendly, and uncooperative. If you scored average in agreeableness, you have some concern with others' needs, but generally unwilling to sacrifice yourself for others. You are generally warm, trusting, and agreeable. Sometimes you can be stubborn and competitive. Depending on the situation, you may be high or low in agreeableness. For example, you may be considerate and friendly to people you know, but you have less concern with others you don't know. The same principle applies for the facets of agreeableness. The facets of agreeableness are trust, morality, altruism, cooperation, modesty, and sympathy. If your score is high in trust, you tend to assume that most people are fair, honest, and have good intentions. If your score in trust is low, you are more likely to see others as selfish, devious, and potentially dangerous. If you scored high in morality, you tend to be candid, frank, and sincere, since you see that there is no need for pretense or manipulation. You are straightforward, which other people find relatively easy to relate to. If you scored low in morality, you tend to believe that a certain amount of deception in social relationships is necessary. You are more guarded and less willing to openly reveal the whole truth. If you scored high in altruism, you tend to find helping other people genuinely rewarding. You find that doing things for others is a form of self-fulfillment rather than self-sacrifice. You are willing to assist those who are in need. If your score is low in altruism, you tend to not to help those in need. You may feel that requests for help are imposition rather than opportunity for self-fulfillment. If you scored high in cooperation, you tend to dislike confrontations, and you compromise or deny your own needs in order to get along with others. If you scored low in cooperation, you tend to intimidate others to get your way. If you scored high in modesty, you tend to not claim that you are better than other people, which in some cases may be derived from low self-confidence. If you are low on modesty, you tend to describe yourself as superior to others. If you scored high in sympathy, you tend to be tender-hearted and compassionate. You feel the pain of others vicariously. If you scored low in sympathy, you are more likely to be not strongly affected by human suffering. You pride yourself on making objective judgments based on reason. You are more concerned with truth and impartial justice than with mercy.
The third core personality trait is conscientiousness. It is the way in which we control, regulate, and direct our impulses. If you scored high in conscientiousness, you are more likely to set clear goals and pursue them with determination. Be regarded as reliable, intelligent, and hardworking. You may avoid trouble and achieve high levels of success through purposeful planning and persistence. On the negative side, you can be compulsive perfectionists and workaholics. You may be regarded as stuffy and boring. If you scored low in conscientiousness, you tend to live for the moment and do what feels good now. Work carelessly and disorganized. Be unreliable, have lack of ambition, and you experience many short-lived pleasures. Note that impulses are not inherently bad. You may be seen by others as colorful and fun to be with. However, some impulses are antisocial and can lead to trouble. Your accomplishments may therefore be small, scattered, and inconsistent. If you scored average in conscientiousness, you tend to be reasonably reliable, organized, and self-controlled, dependable, and moderately well-organized. You have clear goals, but are able to set your work aside. You may have high or low conscientiousness, depending on the situation. For example, you tend to be highly organized at work or at school but is disorganized at home. The same principle applies for the facets of conscientiousness. The facets of conscientiousness are self-efficacy, orderliness, dutifulness, achievement striving, self-discipline, and cautiousness. If you scored high in self-efficacy, you tend to believe that you have the intelligence, drive, and self-control necessary for achieving success. If your score is low in self-efficacy, you tend to feel ineffective and have a sense that you are not in control of your life. If you scored high in orderliness, you tend to be well organized. You like to live according to routines and schedules, and you keep lists and make plans. If you have low score in orderliness, you tend to be disorganized and scattered. If you scored high in dutifulness, you tend to have a strong sense of moral obligation. If your score is low in dutifulness, you tend to find contracts, rules, and regulations overly confining. You may be seen as unreliable or even irresponsible by others. If you scored high in achievement striving, you tend to strive hard to achieve excellence, have the drive to be recognized and be successful. You often have a strong sense of direction in life. On the extreme, you may be too single-minded and obsessed with your work. If you scored low in achievement striving, you are content to get by with a minimal amount of work, and you may be seen by others as lazy. If your score in self-discipline is high, you are more likely to overcome reluctance to begin tasks, and you stay on track despite distractions. If you scored low in self-discipline, you tend to procrastinate, you show poor follow-through, and you fail in completing tasks, even those you want very much to complete. Cautiousness pertains to the disposition to think through possibilities before acting. If you scored high in cautiousness, you are more likely to take time when making decisions. If you scored low in cautiousness, you tend to say or do first thing that comes to mind, without deliberating alternatives and the probable consequences of those alternatives.
The fourth core personality trait is neuroticism. It is a tendency to experience negative feelings. If you scored high in neuroticism, you tend to be reactive and be easily upset, even by what most people consider the normal demands of living. You tend to be considered by other people to be sensitive and emotional. You experience negative feelings such as anxiety, anger, or depression. You respond emotionally, usually more intense than normal, to events that would not affect most people. You interpret ordinary situations as threatening. Minor frustrations are accompanied with feelings of hopelessness. You are often in a bad mood. This is because negative emotional reactions tend to persist for unusually long periods of time, and you have difficulties in regulating emotions. This can diminish your ability to think clearly, make decisions, and cope effectively with stress. If you scored low in neuroticism, you are more likely to possess exceptional calmness and composedness. You tend to be emotionally stable and free from persistent negative feelings. You are less easily upset, and you are less emotionally reactive. You do not react with intense emotions, even to situations that most people would describe as stressful. This does not mean that you experience a lot of positive feelings. If your score is average in neuroticism, you have a typical level of emotional reactivity. Stressful and frustrating situations are somewhat upsetting to you. You are generally calm and are able to cope with stress, but you sometimes experience feelings of guilt, anger, or sadness. You may have high or low neuroticism depending on the situation. The same principle applies for the facets of neuroticism. The facets of neuroticism are anxiety, anger, depression, self-consciousness, immoderation, and vulnerability. If you scored high in anxiety, you tend to be afraid of general or specific situations. You may often feel like something dangerous is about to happen. You feel tense, jittery, and nervous. If you scored low in anxiety, you tend to be calm and fearless. If you scored high in anger, you tend to feel enraged when things do not go your way. You feel sensitive about being treated fairly, and you feel resentful and bitter when you feel that you are being cheated. Whether or not a person expresses annoyance and hostility depends on the individual's level of agreeableness. If you scored low in anger, you tend to not get angry often or easily. If you scored high in depression, you are more likely to feel a lack of energy, and you have difficulty initiating activities. If you scored low in depression, you tend to feel free from depressive feelings. If you scored high in self-consciousness, you're more likely to be sensitive about what others think of you. You are concerned about rejection and ridicule. This causes you to feel shy and uncomfortable around others. You are easily embarrassed and often feel ashamed. Your fear that others will criticize or make fun of you are exaggerated and unrealistic. If you scored low in self-consciousness, you are more likely to not have the impression that everyone is watching and judging you, and you do not feel nervous in social situations. If you scored high in moderation, you are more likely to feel strong cravings and urges that you have difficulty resisting. You are likely to be oriented towards short-term pleasures and rewards rather than long-term consequences. If you scored low in moderation, you tend to not experience strong, irresistible cravings and you do not find yourself tempted to overindulge. If you scored high in vulnerability, you are more likely to experience panic, confusion, and helplessness when under pressure or stress. If you scored low in vulnerability, you tend to feel more poised, confident, and clear thinking even when stressed.
The fifth core personality trait is openness to experience. It is the willingness to try new things, ability to be vulnerable, and capability to think outside the box. It describes a dimension of cognitive style that distinguishes imaginative, creative people from down-to-earth conventional people. If you scored high in openness to experience, you tend to enjoy novelty, variety, and change. Be curious, imaginative, and creative. You are intellectually curious, appreciative of art, and sensitive to beauty. Be more aware of your feelings. Think and act in individualistic and non-conforming ways. You have a facility for thinking in symbols and abstractions far removed from concrete experience. If you scored low in openness to experience, you are more likely to prefer the plain, straightforward, simple, and obvious over the complex, ambiguous, and subtle. You tend to think in plain and simple terms, down-to-earth, practical, and conservative, have a narrow, common interests, and you prefer familiarity over novelty. You are conservative and resistant to change. You may regard the arts and sciences with suspicion, regarding these endeavors as with no practical use. If you scored average in openness to experience, you're more likely to enjoy tradition but is willing to try new things. Think in neither simple nor complex manner. Be practical but willing to consider new ways of doing things. Seek balance between the old and the new. Open and closed styles of thinking are useful in different environments. You may have low or high openness to experience depending on the situation. The same principle applies for the facets of openness to experience. The facets of openness to experience are imagination, artistic interests, emotionality, adventurousness, intellect, and liberalism. If you scored high in imagination, you tend to use fantasy as a way of creating a richer, more interesting world, and you see the real world as too plain and ordinary. If you scored low in imagination, you tend to be more oriented to facts than fantasy. If you scored high in artistic interest, you tend to love beauty both in art and in nature. You become easily involved and absorbed in artistic and natural events. You may not necessarily be artistically trained nor talented. If you scored low in artistic interest, you tend to lack aesthetic sensitivity and interest in the arts. If you scored high in emotionality, you have good access to and awareness of your own feelings. If you scored low in emotionality, you tend to be less aware of your feelings and less likely to express your emotions openly. If you scored high in adventurousness, you tend to be eager to try new activities, such as traveling to foreign lands and experiencing different things, and you find familiarity and routine boring, that you will take a new route home just because it is different. If you scored low in adventurousness, you are more likely to feel uncomfortable with change and you prefer familiar routines. Intellect and artistic interests are the two most important central aspects of openness to experience. If you scored high in intellect, you love to play with ideas. You are open-minded to new and unusual ideas. You like to debate intellectual issues and you enjoy riddles, puzzles, and brain teasers. If you scored low in intellect, you tend to prefer dealing with either people or things rather than ideas. You regard intellectual exercises as a waste of time. Intellect should not be equated with intelligence. Intellect is an intellectual style, not an intellectual ability. Although high scorers on intellect score slightly higher than low intellect individuals on standardized intelligence tests. If you scored high in liberalism, you are more likely to challenge authority, convention, and traditional values. In its most extreme form, psychological liberalists can even represent outright hostility toward rules, sympathy for lawbreakers, and love for ambiguity, chaos, and disorder. If you scored low in liberalism, you prefer the security and stability brought by conformity to tradition. Note that psychological liberalism and conservatism are not identical to political affiliation.
The Depression Anxiety Stress Scale 21, or DASS 21, can give us insight into the presence, severity, and impact of the negative emotional states of depression, anxiety, and stress over the past week. However, DASS 21 is not used to conclude that you have a disorder. Other symptoms such as sleep, appetite, sexual disturbances, and suicidality in depression are not covered in DASS and should be assessed separately. Further exploration through other assessment procedures or referral to a specialist is highly encouraged if one's result shows higher scores, such as mild, severe, and extremely severe in any of the three dimensions. Likewise, results that show lower scores or normal should not be used as a replacement for comprehensive clinical assessment. The first factor is depression. Your score in this factor reflects your experiences that may be symptoms of depression. Persistent feelings of severe unhappiness, uneasiness, and dissatisfaction. Having no expectations or being pessimistic about the future. For example, you ask yourself, why do I have to attend my classes when I would be failing them anyway? Perceiving life as meaningless or having no value. Being overly critical about and undervaluing oneself, ability, and achievements. For example, you tell yourself, nobody will ever love me because I'm broken. Lack of interest or involvement in activities, including activities you previously enjoyed. Being unable to experience enjoyment or satisfaction. Lack of motivation, energy, and initiative to do things. For example, you may have difficulty doing simple daily tasks like proper hygiene, such as showering, brushing your teeth, brushing your hair, and changing into clean clothes. You may also have the tendency to stay in your bed for longer periods of time. If you scored highly in this area, it may help to explore strategies that may help you cope with the possible symptoms of depression. Reaching out to your support system such as friends and family. This may be a good avenue to express your thoughts and feelings to people who make you feel safe and cared for if you are not ready to seek professional help. This will not just help unload pent-up emotions, but it will also make you feel heard. Moreover, it helps your friends and family understand you better and be aware of what they can do to help you when needed. Joining social activities to alleviate isolation and expose yourself to sunlight. Joining social activities, especially those that instigate purpose and meaning like volunteering, may help you steer away from isolation. Additionally, activities held outdoors expose you to sunlight. Being exposed to sunlight increases hormones that help you feel calm and focused and improve your mood. It also helps your body feel awake as a response to light exposure, further contributing to reducing feeling sluggish or wanting to stay in bed for longer periods of time. Engaging in physical activities like exercise help you produce happy hormones that trigger positive feelings and relaxation. Journaling may also help to remind yourself that there is still good that happens to you and around you. For example, you can write 3 things you're grateful for each day, or write the highlights of your day. The second factor is anxiety. Your score in this factor reflects your experiences that could perhaps be symptoms of anxiety. Physiological symptoms like awareness of dryness of the mouth, sweating, hyperventilation, increased heart rate, skeletal muscle tension like shaky hands or trembling, and others in situations that the population deems normal. Escape, cautious or avoidant behaviors. Out of proportion fear. Excessive vigilance in preparation for future danger. For example, preparing 20 blue books for one exam. If your scores show a higher result in this area, you might want to try the following. Practicing different activities that remind you that you are still in control when you feel anxious. Breathing exercises help you become conscious of your breathing and regulate your nervous system, encouraging your body to become more relaxed. Grounding techniques. For example, you can enumerate 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. You may also find other grounding techniques available online. Meditating activities. For example, yoga, listening to music, having long walks, looking at sceneries, gardening, painting, completing a puzzle, and others. Learning what triggers your anxiety through journaling may also help alleviate your anxieties. Write and describe the events that are currently making you feel anxious. Keep in mind that most of the time, it is the anticipation of the future that makes you anxious and not what is currently happening. As you read and reflect on your concerns, explore your options. Could things be different? Can you make your situation better? Can you change your thoughts about it? Ask yourself questions that challenge your thoughts, like, how likely is it that this will happen? How do I know? If what I fear occurs, is it possible that things will not be too bad after all? Is there something I can learn from it if it actually happens? Writing and challenging your thoughts can help you relieve anxiety. It helps you see that things are less likely to happen and they are not as bad as you think they could be. The last factor is stress. Your score in this factor gives insight into your experiences that may possibly be symptoms of stress. Symptoms may be physical, psychological, or behavioral. For physical, there could be nervous arousal or tensed muscles. For psychological, there's difficulty relaxing, which may also be physical and behavioral. Being easily upset or agitated, or being touchy. Being impatient or intolerant of interruption or delay, or being overreactive. For behavioral, you can get easily startled or become nervy, jumpy, or fidgety. If your results show a higher score in this domain, here are some suggestions you could explore in managing stress. Taking care of yourself by exercising regularly helps release happy hormones that help relieve anxiety and stress. Eating healthily helps obtain the nutrients you need to keep a strong mind and healthy body. And getting through enough sleep contributes to improving your mood, help you perform better in tasks, and have a clearer mind. For example, you can take 20 to 30 minutes of brisk walking. Eat the right food at the right time, or avoid caffeine and or nicotine close to your bedtime. Taking breaks help protect your emotional energy, maintain your performance throughout the day, and lessen your recovery time. For example, you can set a designated time for breaks and follow them diligently. You can stretch, nap, or take social breaks, or chat with friends, etc. Talking to your support system about your feelings can help release heaviness and provide opportunities for reassurance, encouragement, and wisdom you might need. Reconceptualizing thoughts and experiences may be helpful as it changes your perspective through awareness, reflection, and realization of what you need to do. Essentially, this gives you a way to accept that there are things you cannot control, but you can use the situation as a learning curve to challenge yourself and bring about your potential and develop your skills. Cultivating hope by having faith in a higher being also helps us accept that there are things beyond our control and embrace our human experience. Acknowledging small wins to emphasize your progress and how you overcame difficulties. And manifesting positive outcomes instead of focusing on what might go wrong. There are many more coping strategies that you may utilize, and although these coping strategies may help, it is still very much encouraged that you reach out to a professional for further assessment, especially when your results show higher scores in any of the 3 factors. Remember, there is nothing wrong with asking for help. Thank you for watching the interpretation of your personality test results. For elaboration and inquiries, or if you need someone to talk to, feel free to message us on the Guidance Center Facebook page. Our school psychologists, guidance counselors, and psychometricians are more than willing to listen to you. Thank you and have a great day.